We can't waste time. I should stop talking. Okay. So today we're doing color grading and color correction. Now, if we were in class normally, you would be all doing this in class in the lab, and I would be walking around, looking over your shoulders, making sure that you're getting it, making sure that you're doing it right. Since I can't do that, I still expect you to follow along. And since I can't see your screens, there is going to be an assignment associated with what you're doing in class today. If you follow along in class today, you'll have everything done by the end of class, pretty much. Okay, so that's what I'm saying is you can't just sit there and listen because you need to actually do it, because listening is not the same thing as doing it. We learn by doing here at Freestyle Academy. So be prepared to send me something at the end of the period so that you can get some credit. It's not gonna be a huge, massive wad of points or anything, but it is gonna be some points. And we haven't done a whole lot of assignments this semester, which means if you don't do it, it'll probably tank your grade. So make sure that you're following along and that you understand these concepts, because these are going to be very helpful to you. This is one of the cool skills that I'm teaching you, and I don't usually teach this to juniors. I want to emphasize this. I normally teach this senior year, but I'm teaching it to you because you guys have been on the ball. You guys have been on top of stuff. And you seem in my estimation, you seem in my observance that you're somewhat capable. So we're gonna test that theory by hitting you with some advanced color correction and color grading. Now I'm gonna preface my remarks today with this, which is I do not consider myself a colorist. That is a job in the industry. That is a whole world and a whole job, and it takes a special kind of person to do that. I think those people have like more like color cones in their eyeballs than I probably have. I'm not colorblind or anything, but there are people that are really good at this, really, really good at this. And if you like this kind of thing, you can make a job out of this. You can make a job out of this. There are people that do this for a living. They do nothing else. All they do is work on color for films. So I would not consider myself an expert. Everything that I've learned just by practice. I've learned by doing. I've learned from read my own research, from watching videos online, and from doing little online tutorial classes and things like that. And just from practicing throughout the years. So I'm going to teach you the basics. I'm going to get you started. And if you like this stuff and you want to learn more about this stuff, there's a wealth of information available online. Seriously, because this is a whole job in and of itself, there are so many videos available online for you to look at, for you to research, all that kind of stuff. So if you like this stuff, there is definitely a lot that you can find online if you are so inclined. All right, so I'm going to bring in my clips. So you should have open on your screen, because I told you that you should have it open before we ever got to class. You should have open on your screen Premiere, and in Premiere, you should have a number of clips. I wanted something that was underexposed to dark, something that was overexposed to bright. I wanted something that had a close-up of a face, right? Like a person's face. I wanted something that was green and like outside, perhaps. And I wanted something that was very colorful. And I wanted, let's get close up. And I wanted just a shot that you really liked, like your favorite kind of shot. Okay, so you should have that open on your screen right now in Premiere. I am going to share my screen so that you can follow along. And I'm going to turn off my sound because you don't need to hear the sound for this. Okay. So, all right, I'm going to make a little timeline real quick. I don't remember. This is all mixed footage, so the frame rate probably doesn't matter. Let's see what I have in here. I got both, but mostly 24, so we'll go with 24. Okay. All right, so I have my timeline, and it's all ready to go. All right, I'm going to start today with a shot that's too dark, because that's the easiest one for us to fix right now. All right, so in your timeline, go to your shot that is too dark. Okay, so I'm going to find my shot that's too dark. This one kind of looks a little dark. Yeah, that's pretty dark. Wonder if I have any other shots that are too dark. Not right now. All right. So here's my shot that is too dark. It's not super too dark. It's actually exposed properly for this part here, but let's pretend it's too dark, and we'll show you how to adjust it anyway. So on your timeline, you're going to look at the one that's too dark. Okay. Now what we're going to do today is color. So you might, to make this easier on you, you might want to use the color layout. So if you may recall way back when from my opening editing lessons from the beginning of the school year, I mentioned that there are different layouts here at the top of the screen that you can choose for Premiere, and they just reorganize your windows based on what it is you're doing. 99 times out of 100, I'm always on this editing one, but once in a while, I'm on the graphics one, very rarely, but often I am on the color one because it kind of lays things out nicely for color. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to hit this color layout. It's going to reorganize everything, and it's going to open here on the side this Lumetri color panel. And it's pronounced Lumetri, I learned, but I've been saying Lumetri for years. And I learned a couple years ago that it's Lumetri, which makes sense because Luma is like a color thing. But I kind of like the sound of Lumetri better. So I'm going to continue doing what I do. So here's my Lumetri color panel. And anything that I adjust in here on a highlighted shot. So if I have a whole bunch of shots in here, any changes that I make to this panel will adjust the shot that is highlighted. So right now I only have one clip in here, but it's highlighted. If I do not click on it, I can't change it because it's not highlighted. So I want to adjust this clip that is too dark. So I'm going to use my Lumetri color panel here to adjust this. And if I want to just change this so it's brighter, I can start right here with exposure. It's really easy. I can just drag this up and look at that. Now I have a shot that's not quite so dark anymore. If I want to make it darker, I can make it darker. If I want to make it really bright, I can make it really bright. Okay. That's the easiest way to adjust that. But usually you're not going to just change one thing. I mean, I actually can change that and it doesn't look half bad. I start to lose some detail here in the hot spots. But that's actually not too shabby. But we're going to be more precise with this in a second. But let me go through these things so that you understand what they all do, because they are all a little bit different. So this one is the overall exposure. This raises and lowers the overall exposure. This raises and lowers the overall contrast, which I'll explain here in a minute with the aid of some diagrams. This adjusts the highlights. So the bright spots, if I want to make the bright spots brighter, I can adjust the highlights. If I want to make the bright spots darker, I can adjust the highlights. And this is shadows. If I want to make the dark spots brighter, I can make the dark spots brighter, or I can make the dark spots darker. And then we have whites and blacks. And this is like the other, how can I explain this? This is where it clips. This is where you decide where white is and where you decide where true black is, empty pixel spaces. So if I want to clip this, we call it crushing the whites, or we call it crushing the blacks. I can crush the blacks here. And now you can see like anything within this range, the computer interprets as just black. And so this information is now gone. There's no information in here anymore. It's just black. Like if I raise the exposure, it's still black. See? And if I remove that, then now you can actually see that there actually is information in there. But you're telling the computer anything after a certain point, interpret as black. And you'll do that once in a while, depending on the needs of your film. And whites is the exact same thing. It's just at the high end, but you're deciding what color is white. So if I want to crush the whites, I can do that as well, and say this is white, or I can bring it all the way down and say anything that's this color is actually going to be interpreted as like a gray. Okay. All right. So that's kind of the basics for how it works. You also have saturation here, which increases the color. It's kind of hard to see on this shot because this shot's pretty monotone and gray, but you can kind of see it in the curtain in the background. It kind of turns yellow as I bring this up. And that's the saturation. I can make it totally black and white, or I could crank it up until it's bleeding color. All right. So that's sort of the basics of, if you ever want to reset something, you can just hit this reset effect up here at the top. So that is the basics for basic color correction. Now, we also have here temperature and tint, which was going to become more important in our color shots. Right now, I'm working with one that's pretty just monotone. But if I want to change the temperature of this shot, I can make it kind of bluish, or I can make it kind of yellowish, or I can make it kind of greenish, or I can make it kind of magenta-ish, or I can mix this and make it kind of purple, or I can mix this and make it kind of like yellowy green. Just kind of depends on the needs of your shot. If you're just trying to correct a color of this, maybe you forgot to set your white balance on your camera, or maybe your auto white balance didn't do a very good job and the shot looks too blue or the shot looks too yellow because you went inside or outside. Maybe you've noticed that in some of your camera work before. You can use this white balance selector and hit this little eyedrop here and choose white. So where's some white in my shot? I'm going to choose this right here. That looks like white to me. And that's going to make little adjustments for the whole color of the entire shot. And now it's going to be hopefully a little bit better. Sometimes it works great. Sometimes it doesn't work great. You kind of have to click around and find the right white that looks good to you. Okay. That's basic color correction. Now, here's where things get tricky. And I want to emphasize this. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so you can all look at my face as I make this very clear to all of you, all 4 of you who I can actually see. Okay. All right. You ready? Okay. 5 of you. Thank you, Daria. All right. All right. Here we go. You're all popping in now. I see how it is. Okay. Ready? I'm going to emphasize this. Okay. Not all monitors are created equal. Okay. It's a sad fact of life. Okay. Not all monitors are created equal. Some of you are looking at me on your big fancy 4K HDR television. Maybe, I don't know. Some of you are looking at me on your phone. Some of you are looking at me on an old like 720 monitor. Some of you are looking at me on a 1080p monitor. And all of them are a different brand. And all of them, because they are a different brand and because they are a different model, they all have a unique color profile. And in that color profile, they have different settings about how to read color. And as a user of that monitor, you've pushed buttons on the monitor, the actual physical monitor, to adjust the color if it looks too red or too pink or too blue or too yellow. And you've made adjustments to that. So what you see in terms of color is going to look very different compared to the next monitor in the next room or the monitor that another student is using. So this is where things get tricky, because if you start color grading something, color grading is the word for changing color and making it look filmic. Color correction is like fixing it. If you're color correcting or color grading your footage, and you're doing it based on your unique monitor, it's going to look very different when you bring it into school and I watch it on my big screen. It's going to look very different when you put it on YouTube and you watch it on your phone. I experience this all the time. It's very frustrating, and you have to accommodate for that. So how do you work with that? Well, the professionals have calibrated monitors so that they know that what they see is what they get. But not all of us can get these really expensive calibrated monitors or get a professional to come inside and calibrate our monitors for us. You can do the best you can with it, but you can't always work with what you got to work with what you got, right? So how do we know that we are interpreting color in the right way if we can't really trust our eyes? Think about it, right? Like, how can we do that? Because you can trust your eyes to a certain degree, but you can't trust your eyes completely. So how do we do that? So that's the point that I want to make, and I'm going to show you the answer. And the answer is use math. Oh, I know. Turns out math, you actually use math for something. Don't worry. You don't actually have to do any math. The computer's going to do the math for us. But what we're going to do is we are going to look at the graphs. Now, because I selected the color layout here, I have here next to my effect controls, Lumetri color scopes. And if I click on the color scopes, I have it all here. And if for some reason you don't have that up on your screen, you can probably get it by going to workspaces and making sure that you're on color and then saying reset to saved layout, and everything will pop back to the default. And then there's Lumetri scopes. And if you still don't have it, you can right click and things like that, because right clicking is the answer to everything in Adobe. So here I have these color scopes. Now, because I'm looking at exposure right now and not color, we're going to get to color here in a second, because I'm just looking at light and dark right now. So because I'm just looking at light and dark right now, I'm going to choose a certain type of color scope. So follow along with me here. I'm going to right click on my color scope here. I'm going to choose the waveform because that's what I want. And then I'm going to go to waveform type, and I'm just going to choose Luma. And Luma is just going to give me the information about how bright or how dark something is on my screen. Okay, go ahead and do that if you haven't already. And your graph is going to look different from mine because your footage is different from mine. Now, if you watch this, watch as I play this, you can start to understand how the graph works. See that? Do you see how it lines up with the shot? All right, these are the stools here. You can kind of see that this dark spot right here. So the darks are down here at the bottom towards 0. So all this information that's dark down here, that's the background here that's really dark. These dark spots down here, that's the stuff over here. But I also have a few little highlights. Like look at this highlight right here. This line right here. What is that? That's this line right here. See that? I've got this line over here. What is that? That's this window over here. See? And this square right here is a little bit brighter than this dark stuff. What's this? Oh, that's the bookshelf right here. Okay, yours graph is going to look different, but see how it lines up? And you'll start to get better at reading this graph the more experience you get with it. But if I play through this, you can kind of see, oh, that's weird. What's this right here? Oh, it's this big white piece of paper. See how that works? So this Luma graph is all about how bright or how dark things are, okay? And you can kind of see how it lines up. So this, I can trust this because this graph is exactly the same on every single monitor, no matter what. Right? So that's cool. So now I've got something that is independent of the monitors. I can actually trust this. So I can sit here and I can figure out what I want to do with this shot. Okay, so 0 is down here. 0 is black, totally black, empty space, nothing's in there. You can't see anything. Okay, 100, therefore, is pure white, completely white, no information in there, nothing going on. So you can see if I adjust the exposure in here on this clip, it's going to change the graph based on what I do to this exposure. Okay, so now we can actually see a little bit better by looking at the graph. We can actually see a little bit better about what each of these sliders do. The exposure raises and lowers the entire graph. The contrast separates the graph. It stretches it. Watch this, watch this, watch this. Ready? It stretches it right from the middle. See that? It stretches it or squashes it. Okay, that's cool. The highlights take the stuff at the very, very top and move it up or down. See that? Very, very top and move it up or down. Okay, the shadows do the same thing, but they do it at the bottom. And then you've got the whites, which take the tip top, the very, very tip top, and move it up or down. And then you've got the blacks, which do the same thing, but at the bottom. Okay, so we can start adjusting this shot based on our graph. Now, a good rule of thumb is as thus. These are kind of the rules for when you do color grading and color correction. And you know, you get creative and you can break the rules when you want to be creative, but this is sort of the basis. The basis is you want to stay between 0 and 100, unless you're working with HDR, but none of you are working with HDR. And I severely doubt that any of you are looking at me on an HDR monitor at this very moment that's corrected for BT 2020. So I'm going to assume that that's not the case. But if you ever start color grading in HDR, which is a big pain in the butt, I have done it, then this will not be true. But for the most part, we're going to keep all our footage between 0 and 100, okay? So I'm going to take my blacks down here. So first of all, for this shot, I'm going to look at this shot and say, all right, what do I want this to look like? Okay, so what midtones are right around 50. So if I had a person in this shot, for example, I would want that person to be right around 50. I don't have a person in this shot, but I do have a lot of information below 40. I like it at least to get to 50. So I am going to raise my exposure a little bit, and I'm going to crank it up just so that this table, which is kind of like the main focus of this shot, is more close in the 50 range, in the midtones range. Okay. Now, when I did that, a lot of my highlights, which I actually liked before, got too high. So I'm gonna bring down some of my highlights now because I don't want to lose that information. So I'm going to bring down some of that highlights, and my midtones are still going to stay between 40 and 50, which I like. I'm going to bring down some of my whites because there's that tip top is still a little too high. See how information's getting crushed up there? So I'm going to bring down some of that. There we go. There we go. And now I'm just below 100, and I like that. I like that. That's looking pretty good. Now my midtones got a little bit lower, so I might start raising my shadows a little bit, for example, just to try to crank up the bottom, but leave the top where it is. There we go. I like that. Okay. But now I've got kind of a gap here at the bottom. You see that? I've got between 0 and like 6 or so. And that's actually pretty good. Normally, you don't want to go all the way down to 0. Usually you want your bottom level to be somewhere around 5-ish. But I liked the darkness that I had in this shot. I want some of it to kind of clip out just a little bit. So I'm going to bring this down a little bit lower just so it's almost kissing 0. So I'm going to take my blacks and bring it down just a little bit. And I can't get it in there. So I'm going to actually have to type in a number here. So I'm going to put in -3. And that's kissing the bottom, but I am losing a little information there. And I kind of don't want that. So maybe I'll bring it back to 0. And there we go. That's just barely kissing it. And I like that. I'm looking at this shot now and I'm saying, okay, that looks pretty cool. That's pretty well exposed for the whole thing. Now, maybe I don't want this. Now, if I'm making a horror film, for example, I might want it to be darker than this. So that's okay. I might take my shadows that I raised and I might bring them all the way down. And I might keep it. Look at that. That's a very different look. But I still have all that information. And now it's just below 200. And I still have some of these midtones, and I still have a lot of these highlights, which are nice because when you're shooting something in the dark, you still need the highlights in order to distinguish something from anything. Otherwise, it's just a black image and you can't see anything, right? So I actually want some of these highlights to be a little bit brighter even in this. So I'm actually going to just increase my contrast because I'll stretch it out. That'll make my brights brighter and my darks darker. And now I don't have to lower my shadows quite so much. I can keep my bottom part and then keep that right above 25 or so. And I can even increase my highlights just a touch, or even increase my whites just a touch. And now I can bring my shadows back down if I want to stay below 200. And that's actually kind of a nice horror look, but I haven't ditched any information. I haven't lost any information. Okay. So you should be playing along with your shot and trying to figure out the best exposure for your shot. I'm going to go back a few steps and get to my more normally exposed shot. There's my normally exposed shot. Okay. And it's all based on looking at this graph. So once you've kind of got your dark shot kind of turned into like a more properly exposed shot, I want you to save this project. Okay. Because remember, you're going to have to turn something in at the end of class. So don't delete anything. Okay. So save this project once you have that color corrected thing that you like. And the next shot that I'm going to bring in is my overexposed shot. Okay, so find your overexposed shot. I've got to find it. I'm stealing it from a student's film, so I've got to clip it out here. So let's see here. Okay, so now I'm going to bring my overexposed shot into my timeline, which apparently this student shot at 720, which makes sense when I think about it. Make this larger so you can see it. Okay. All right. So here's my overexposed shot. And immediately looking at the graph, looking at the Luma graph, you could totally see that it's overexposed. All this stuff is crushed up here where it's white. And there's like nothing down here where it's dark. Now, when things are overexposed, this is where you're kind of limited. Okay. This is another moment where I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment so you can look at my face so I can make an emphasis. You ready? Gonna make an emphasis. Okay. When you have an overexposed shot, and I taught you this before. I taught you this when we went through cameras at the beginning of the year. This may be familiar to you. When you have an overexposed shot, okay, you can try to correct it as much as you want. But when you have an overexposed shot, a blown out portion of the area, when the highlights are just completely white, that information is lost. It is gone. No matter what you do, It will always be blank, empty space. It'll just be white or it'll be gray. But there is no information there because you've blown it out. It's gone and it's gone forever. Okay. That's why it's actually better to be a little under on your cameras. Again, it depends on the camera and it depends on the format that you're shooting. And if you're shooting RAW, that's a totally different world, but none of us are shooting RAW right now. Okay. So in this context, if you don't have that information, it's gone forever. It's actually better to be underexposed than it is to be overexposed. Now, that's not always the case. It depends on your format. If you're shooting RAW, sometimes it's better to be overexposed. Okay, but we're not shooting RAW right now, so it's better to be just a little underexposed, and it's better to be properly exposed. Right, that's really what you want. But if you're overexposed, that's worse than if you are underexposed, and I will show you why. So here is our overexposed shot. Now I want to adjust this, so I'm going to say, all right, let's just bring the exposure down, and you can see it's just going to bring that line down, and I can try bringing the highlights down to spread that white portion apart, but you can see it's just not stretching. It's just not getting any bigger than that. I can even like stretch it further. I can go up to negative 150. I can bring the whites down, but I'm already below 100. Like, this is the best I can do. No matter what I do, this area is going to be blown out. It's always going to be like that thin line because there's literally no information stored in here other than 100. And it can't stretch 100 apart from nothing. It needs more data in there, and there is no more data in there. So even if I adjust this like as much as I can bring down the shadows. I can bring down the blacks and try to get it closer to 0. I can bring down the shadows a little bit more. You know, like, this is not really looking a whole lot better than what I had before. Here's what I had before. And here's what I have now. I mean, I have some detail in her face, but it's not like super attractive because a huge portion of her face is like blown out. And now the image is breaking down. And I'm getting weird pixelization and stuff. This is a rough shot. This is not a great shot. Your shot might be better or worse than this. You might be able to save your shot. Maybe your shot isn't so overexposed that you can save it. So let's see if I have, let's see. I think I have, let's see. I think there's a shot in here that I saw that was overexposed. Yeah, so if I try this, that information is gone. You can try it. Let's try it anyway. All right, so if I adjust this shot, yeah, see, it's gone. There's nothing there. It's just all highlights. Later in this shot, where the bus arrives, there's information in here. I can actually work with that. So if I want to bring this down, because it's really high, a lot of this information is above 60, I can actually work with this. So I can bring this down. I can make that midtones around 50. Okay, I can stretch this out with some contrast. That's already looking better. Okay, I can bring the whites back up, just the tip top, but I can bring down the highlights and try to stretch it out, and I am, so that's cool. All right, then I'm going to bring the blacks down a touch. And I want some of these shadows to be a little bit darker, so I'm going to bring that down as well. And I don't hate this. This is actually looking a little bit better than it was before. If I turn this off, see the difference? I'm actually getting some of that information back on the bus there. I can actually see a little bit more of it. So it depends on how overexposed you are. If you're really overexposed and blown out, not a lot you can do. That shot's going to be thrown away. But if it's a little overexposed, you can actually work with that. So play around with that a little bit if you haven't already been. And you're gonna have to send me a screenshot later today of all these shots before and after. Okay, so if you're not following along, you're not clicking around, you're gonna have to do all this, and if you want your credit for today, otherwise you will not get your points. Maybe I'll even mark you absent. I don't know. We'll see. All right. So the next shot I'm gonna bring in then. How am I doing on time? I'm doing okay on time. The next shot I'm going to bring in is, let's do a skin tone, because a lot of the time we have to worry about skin tone. Okay. So I'm going to bring in a skin tone shot. So this is your close-up shot. So find your close-up. So I got a close-up of a guy. I'm going to find one that's a little, I'm going to bring her in because she's kind of yellow. That shot is just a little yellow. All right. So find your close-up shot. Bring it into your timeline. And now we actually have to start worrying about color. So we're going to start with our exposure. So if you need to make corrections with your exposure, do that first. And so I'm going to look for the skin tone. So here's the skin portion. And it looks like a lot of my skin portions at 50 or a little bit below. So that's probably good. I might want to bring it up just a little bit. So I'm gonna bring up this exposure just a little bit, because I want that skin tone to be more around 50, and that already looks a little bit better to me, just to my eyes. I'm going to bring some of these highlights up a little bit. I'm going to bring some of these whites up a little bit. I'm going to stretch out these highlights a little bit more. And this is getting too bright. I don't need to go all the way up to 100 if I don't want to. There doesn't have to be anything that's like super pure white. But I do want these skin tones here to stay right around 50. So that's actually looking pretty good to me. I've got some dark spots here. That's the frame, but that's good because the frame's got color in it. I don't want it to be black. So that's good. And I've got nothing that's creeping below 0. So I actually do still have detail in her hair a little bit. I might want to increase that just a little bit. Can I get any more detail out of her hair? Just a little bit, but now I probably do need to bring the blacks down a little bit more. I'm going to bring that down to -3, which is so small, but it's just enough. That's just what I need. And now I'm just going to increase my contrast just a touch, just to make it pop a little bit more. Okay, so I got my exposure all set the way that I want it to now. Now we're actually ready to work with color. So here's where we start using some other scopes. Okay. So over here on my Lumetri Scopes, I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose a different scope. I could do Waveform again, but me personally, I like Waveform just for the Luma curve, just for the Luma graph. I'm not going to use Waveform for my color. I'm going to go to Parade instead and do Parade RGB. And I don't need this one right now because I fixed my exposure. I can leave it up there if I want, but since you're looking at my screen, I'm going to turn it off just so you can see more of what I'm doing here. And now I'm looking at my Parade RGB. And you can change your Parade type if you want, but I want Parade RGB. That's what I'm working with right now. And what this graph does is this graph is going to show me all of the red in the shot, all the green in the shot, and all the blue in the shot, which is what the color is all made up of on my screen. Now, if I look at this right away, what can you see? What can you tell? Somebody speak up.
Red is the most.
Red.
Yeah, there's a lot of red. There's a lot of red in here. There's a lot of red. There's a lot of green. And there's not as much blue. And that actually makes sense. If I look at this shot, it's a little more yellow, right? And it's a little more orangish than maybe it ought to be. So the first thing I can try is I can try that white balance thing with the eye drop. So let's just give that a try and see what happens. So I'm going to take my eye drop. I'm going to choose white. Her shirt is white. And boom, nothing changed. Oh, there we go. There's white. Okay, so immediately it added a lot of blue. It added a lot of blue. And I'm looking at this graph now, and I'm saying to myself, okay, that's good. But now there's actually not enough red. Now there's actually too much blue. So that's like a decent starting point. But now I'm going to start to adjust this a little bit more. So I'm going to take some of the blue out, and I'm going to try to get these 3 graphs to line up. Now I have to be careful here because there's different parts of the graph. So like right now, the top is lined up at 204 at 80. But right here, like this is not lined up. See this chunk right here? That's not lined up with any of this stuff. Since I care most about her skin tone, that's the part that I'm going to try to line up the most. And her skin tone, I know, is somewhere around 50 because that's where I set my exposure when I was working on the Luma part of this. So I'm going to look around for her skin tones, and I can see that they're not lining up here. I've got a lot of red still and a lot of green still, and the blues kind of over here. So I'm going to fiddle around with this, and I'm going to try to make these look even. As best I can for those midtones. But you can see it can sometimes be a challenge, because if you go too far to try to get the midtones, see, like here, my midtones are looking good, but now I've totally lost the highlights. So you kind of have to mix and match. And there are other ways to do this. You could use, if you want to do something more advanced, for example, you could go into your curves in this curves panel, and I could actually adjust just the highlights or of one specific color, for example. So if I wanted to bring this down a little bit, I can. If I want to bring this down a bunch, I can. And now I can start to match certain key areas of this. So if I want to bring the red shadows, there we go. And now if I want to adjust the midtones of this red a little bit, but then still stretch out, there we go. And you can really adjust this a whole lot. Now you can see that this is not working super great for my shot right now. And that's because we're kind of limited with our cameras. Like there's only so much color changing you can do on your shot before the image starts to break down. This is why, like, camera operators and directors and cinematographers, we love to shoot raw, because there's so much information there and you can adjust it a lot and it's not going to break down. But this was shot on a DSLR, kind of like yours. It's going to break down if I do too much of it. So I'm not going to get too crazy here. I'm just going to stick to some real basic level of correction and just try to match these up broadly as best I can. And if I do this right around here, that's pretty good. And I actually like the look of that based on what I'm seeing with my eyes. Okay. So play around with that if you haven't been already. And I'm going to move on because there's still a couple things that I want to get to. So the next scope I can do now that I've got this basic correction done here, since I'm working with skin tones, the next scope I'm going to look at is I'm going to turn off my Parade, and I'm going to instead put on my vector scope. Ooh, vector scope. Oops, wrong vector scope. I'm going to put on vector scope YUV. And this is cool. This shows me my color wheel. Now we're getting into some advanced stuff here, folks. We're getting into some advanced stuff. But this color wheel is super cool because it's going to show me where all the color sits on my spectrum. The closer it is to the center, the more gray it is. So if I bring my saturation down, you can see everything's just in the center. And if it's bleeding color, you can see it spreads out further out. Okay. Now, here's a cool thing about skin tones. Skin tones are always on the orange color spectrum. It doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter what ethnicity you are. Because of the melanin in all of our skin, everyone sits on that orange color spectrum. That's what this line is right here. This line right here is made for skin tone. That's why it's there. It's there so you can look at it and be like, that's my skin tone. So a good way to make sure that your skin tone is correct is to look at this graph and make sure that the information is lining up on that line the way that you want it to. There should be a little line from the center, right? Just kind of right here, kind of like at 10 o'clock or 10:30 or something like that. And to make this really perfect, I'm going to do an old school trick. This is an old school trick, right? I'm going to put a crop on here. This is old school. This is old school Premiere editing. This is how you know I'm old. All right. I'm going to put it on here. And I'm going to go to my effect controls. And I'm going to crop just her face so that all the color I have is just her face. And now if I go back to my scope, this is just that information that I see on the screen. And I'm looking at it and I'm saying to myself, yeah, this is pretty good. That's not bad. Like that's on that line. That's where I want it to be. It might be a little bit heavy on the magenta side. So I might bring this magenta down just a little bit. You can see how it moves. But if I bring it down too much, then this curve starts to get into the yellow. So I don't want to bring it down too much. So I'm going to stick with that. And this is a helpful way to make sure that your skin tone is the way that you want it to look, because skin tone is really the most important thing. That's what our eyes recognize the most. That's really what you want to be color balanced as best you can. And when I have everything set, I can go back to my effects and just delete my crop because I do not need it anymore. I will highlight it and press delete. And this shot looks pretty good to me. It's not bad. It's not bad. This is well color corrected. So that's color corrected for skin tone. Now, I can be a lot more advanced with this. This is just the basic. This is the very, very basic level. There's so much more I could do to color correct a shot like this. This is so very basic, okay? There's a lot more that I could do by going into these other color wheels down here, by going into secondary color correction, which is a really cool thing that I discovered a few years ago that I love. There's a lot of fun things that you can do in here if you want to explore and be creative, but I'm just going to teach you the basics today because I don't want to overwhelm you. So we're going to stay in this world of basic color correction. And then at the very end, I'm going to show you this creative tab. All right. So the next shot I'm going to bring in is my green shot, my outside shot, my greenery that I told you to get. And I've got a bunch of those. So here's one. So I'm going to bring this in. And here's Los Alamos High School. So I'm going to start and do everything exactly the same. Everything that we've done so far is building upon the other. So I'm going to start with my waveform, and I'm going to adjust my exposure first. I'm going to get that right first. So I'm going to expose this properly. And it's not super exposed improperly. My whites are a little bit over 100. So I'm actually going to bring those down just a little bit. I'm going to bring down those highlights a touch. I'm going to bring down those whites just so they're kissing 100. And that already looks a little bit better to me. Actually, you know what I think I'll do? I think I'll just adjust the exposure because the darkness could be brought down a little bit as well. There we go. Yeah, that's what I want. And then I'm going to bring my shadows down. No, I don't think I need my shadows down a whole lot. That's probably enough. And I'll bring the blacks down just a touch. There we go. And then I'll bring my highlights down just a little more. There we go. And that's all I need to do for that shot. I really didn't do much. I just brought down the highlights a little bit. So now I'm looking good. All right, looking at my parade here, my RGB parade, the color here looks good. Color here looks pretty good. So this is actually well exposed and well color already matched. Like the Canon did a good job on this one. Whoever shot this did a good job on their white balance, which makes sense because I know the student that shot this. Now, here's where you can start being a little more creative. Up until this point, I've been teaching you how to fix color. I've been teaching you how to correct your image. But it's not always just about color correction. It's also about color grading. And color grading is the art of making your image look cool to support the story that you're trying to convey. So again, like if I'm making a horror film, I don't want it to look like this. I've color corrected it, but I don't want it to look like this because I want it to match the tone and the feeling of my story. Okay, so let's pretend, for example, that this is a sad and really gloomy day. All right, if this is a sad and gloomy day, I want to make it feel a little washed out. So I might take my contrast and I might bring it down. And it's going to make that a little more washed out. And now, because I brought it down, I'm going to bring the exposure down a little bit more. And I'm going to bring the blacks down a little bit more. And I'm going to bring the shadows down a little bit more. And now I've got a little washed out kind of image. All right. I might even desaturate this a little bit. And now it's starting to look a little gloomier. Okay. And if I want to push this further, maybe I'll add a little bit of blue, right? We always associate blue with sadness, right? You're feeling blue, right? So this is a fun little trick that I can do. So rather than keep these three colors the same in my RGB parade, I'm going to break that and I'm going to make this image more blue. And look at that. Now it's a sad day. I've just set this up. I just did my Griffiths pattern. I just did my establishing shot. And immediately, you know, it's a sad and gloomy day before you even saw my main character. That's cool. We're already in the movie. I'm already storytelling with just one shot. by using these methods of color correction. Okay, maybe I don't want a sad and gloomy day. Maybe I want, let me go back here. Maybe I want a bright and sunny day. Okay, well, if I want a bright and sunny day, maybe I'll bring my contrast up a little bit more. Maybe I'll bring the highlights back up a little bit. Okay, that's already looking bright and sunnier. And maybe I want it to be more cheerful. Maybe I want it to be warm and happy. So I'm going to bring the yellow up instead. I could bring it up a whole bunch if I want. That's a little too much. But right around there, you can see those greens really start to pop. Maybe I want to add a little more green because now it's starting to turn kind of orange. It's starting to feel like fall. All right, so I'm going to add a little bit more green. And maybe I want the saturation to be increased a little bit. So I'll add some saturation. I don't want to go too far because it'll make my colors bleed. But look at that. Look at that. That's nice and bright and cheery, isn't it? This is a bright and happy day. Super different from before. I can even just turn this off. That's my original shot. And that's my color graded shot. So this is a really powerful method to support the story that you are trying to convey. Okay. I like doing this with the outside shots because I think it's really fun to make green pop like this. And that's a really good way for you kind of to be able to see easily what it is that you're working with. So if you have a colorful shot, you can explore this with your colorful shot as well. Maybe you want a certain part of your color shot to really pop. So let's see if I've got a colorful shot. Right, here's a nice colorful shot. And this is a documentary about this girl who like makes and designs skateboards, which is kind of cool. But she's like a fun, quirky personality. This is a documentary. So I might want to emphasize the color of the shot. Now, this is actually already, because I'm stealing it from a student film, this has actually already been color graded. So it's already bright and colorful in this shot. But I could push this further if I wanted to by increasing the saturation or by mixing and matching these colors like I am so inclined. Now, if we're getting into color grading, okay, that means we're no longer just doing basic color correction. All right, so here we've been living here in this tab, this basic color correction. Okay, but now since we're color grading, since we're going further than just color correction, it's time for us to get into this creative space. Okay, so here I am in this creative space here, and there's actually a lot of things that I can do here. I can fade the film if I want, which gives it kind of a filmic look. Okay. I can increase the sharpness. I wouldn't go too far with this, but you can increase the sharpness a little bit if you want something to pop a little bit more. You can increase the vibrance. Vibrance is cool. I would recommend that if you're going to saturate your colors and make them really pop, I would recommend that you don't do that under basic saturation. In fact, I'm going to go back and I'm going to change that back to 100 where it was. And I'm going to change my vibrance instead, because that is better at making colors pop without making the colors bleed. So if you want your colors to be really bright and colorful, I recommend using vibrance instead. And if you need something that's a little more powerful, they have the saturation slider in here as well. Okay. We've also got, now this is kind of cool. Check this out. We've got under this creative tab, we've got the shadow tint and the highlight tint. So you may, if you've watched a lot of Marvel movies, you probably noticed the orange teal effect, where they make like everything in the background blue and teal, and they make all the skin tones kind of orange. And they do that because those are opposites, and the colors look nice when you put an opposite with an opposite. So if I wanted to do that, I actually could. I could make the shadows kind of blue, and I could make the highlights kind of orange. And now I've got this kind of orange teal effect. You can see it more clearly with, let's see if I have, let me get, there we go. Let me get a skin tone here. So let's try this one. So I'll make the shadows more blue. I'll make the highlights more orange, and now more yellow orange. And now I've got kind of this effect. I need to adjust this other stuff in my basic because I didn't do that first. There we go. But now you can see I'm starting to get that teal effect. And then I can bring up the vibrance a little bit. There we go. Now I'm starting to get that Marvel look. I'm starting to get that action movie look. So that's one way that you could get that kind of look if you wanted to. See the difference? Look at that. That's a big difference. I kind of rounded out her face a little bit. Took away some of the shine, took away some of the highlights. Okay. So that's one thing that you can do with these little color sliders. There's other things here. There's curves and there's color wheels. There's secondary. These are all really cool things. There's a vignette if you wanted to add a vignette. So if I had a shot here and I wanted to add a vignette, it's really easy. You just kind of add the vignette and play around with how you want it to look. And that's nice. That creates a nice little vignette if you want to have that there. These other options I'm not going to teach you about today. But if you're into this stuff, I encourage you to look at these. These are super powerful tools that can really change how you want your image to look. But the last thing that I'm going to show you is you also have in here these creative looks. These are like, I hate using this phrase, but it makes you understand. These are like Instagram filters, okay? So if you want a certain look for your film, there's actually a whole bunch of options in here. Look at all this stuff. And these are different film stocks that you can mimic, but there's also other things in here. So for example, let me turn off my basic here. So I'm working with a basic shot, but let's say I want to have this look like film stock. There you go. Now it's looking like this film stock, and I can kind of cycle through these, and you can see here in the preview what they might look like. So let's say this is like blue coal. Look, there's even like a day for night. Let me find a day for night. So if I'm shooting this and I want it to be like day for night. Let's see. Is it in here? Yeah, there it is. Day for night. Saw it. Where'd it go? Here it is. We're pretending it's nighttime. And if I want this to be more or less intense, I can like increase or lower the intensity of the filter, just like you would on Instagram. Okay. Instagram and all those social media sites, they steal it from the professionals. Okay. So I can kind of change the filter how I want it to look. But there's a lot of other options in here that you can kind of play around with. Here's like a really yellow one. If I'm making like a Western.
Are these just LUTs?
They're kind of like LUTs. It's a little bit different, but yes, sort of like LUTs, but different. Like you can actually apply LUTs in here in the basic correction. So if you have your own LUTs, then you can actually import them into Premiere and install them, and then have them here in the basic correction tab. Just right here, for example, there are some presets in there, but we're not using any of these cameras, so I would not recommend any of these.
Yeah, we use Aries in this class.
It'll make your camera look different. But if you're using Cinestyle, for example, Cinestyle is a picture profile made by Technicolor. You may have seen Technicolor in the credits of your favorite movie. And if you want to install that onto your freestyle camera, you are welcome to do so. It takes just a little bit of technical savvy, but not a whole lot. You can Google it. It's pretty easy. And that makes you shoot really flat. You might remember when we set up your cameras, we chose that neutral picture profile setting so that it would shoot really flat. That allows us to have more room to color grade for this purpose. But if you want to shoot even more flat on your camera, you can install Cinestyle onto your camera. Feel free to do so. I do not care. It's up to you. And there is actually a LUT that comes with Cinestyle that you can put in here. And it looks good. I use it. I used to use it all the time before I started shooting on a different camera. I used it all the time for all my work, and it was great. So anyway, you can go through here and kind of pick and choose. And there's a lot of fun little looks in here that you can kind of play around with. And then you're like, ooh, I like this one. This has a good film look. I like that. This is looking nice. And after a while, you start to get, something that starts to look more like a movie, which is what you want. I'm gonna play around with some looks here. film noir. Nice. Got a film noir look. Let's see what I want to do for this one. I don't want to get too crazy. Let's try. That's not bad. It's a little harsher than I like. Cycle through some of these. Ooh, that's a nice sort of faded look. Go back to that fade one. I like that a little bit. That's a nice film look. Yeah. I'll double click this and it'll apply it. And I can increase or lower the intensity here. I like that. That's a nice film look for a documentary. Not too crazy. Nothing nuts. Nothing nuts. Okay. Your mission, you got like 10 minutes left. So that's cool. So I go on time today. Go me. All right. This is your assignment. It's going to be worth points. Okay. That's how I make sure that you participated in class today. Okay. So this is what you must do. Okay. You need to send me a screenshot, just a screenshot of all of your clips before you had fun with them in color. Okay. Before you expose them properly. Okay. So I want all those clips that I told you to get on your list. Just go to your Finder window or whatever, go to your Explorer window and just take a screenshot or play it on a video, take a screenshot, whatever, just enough that I can see it. Okay. So this is the shot before, and then go into Premiere and adjust your color, play around with it. And for the first couple of shots, the overexposed and the underexposed, okay, I want those just to be color corrected. Don't get crazy on the color grading. Okay. And then on those later one, and on the close-up shot, just make the color look right. Okay, make it look good. And then on the greenery shots, on the outside shots, and on your colorful shots, and on the shot that you just like, I want you to have fun with those ones and color grade those ones. Okay, and I want you to take a screenshot of those. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder in the Google Drive Dropbox, and it's going to say color lesson or color grading, whatever it's going to say. It's going to color, something color, okay? And then in there, I want you to create a folder with your name on it because you're going to have like a whole bunch of screenshots. And I don't want just like a flood of screenshots. I want it to be a little bit organized. Okay. So make a folder in there that says Vamp or a folder in there that says Jamie or whomever. Right. And then in your folder in there, I want you to put all of your screenshots. So you should have how many? 10 screenshots, I think. Right. Because the 2 exposure ones, the color one, like the skin tone one, the fun. Yeah, you should have 10 screenshots in there when all is said and done. And if you've been following along with me today, you probably already did all the work for at least 6 to 8 of those shots. You need to screenshot them. And then I want you to play around with your fun shot because we didn't do anything with your fun shot. Okay. Are there any questions? You guys understand what I'm asking? Okay. I would like it by the end of today. So if you are, if you've been watching and listening instead of actually following along, that's okay. I hope you can remember what it is you need to do. I did record this lesson and I will upload it, but it takes YouTube a while to get it and process it and stuff like that. So I'll share it with you, but it won't be shared with you until later tonight on my YouTube channel. So if you need to go back and review, I will have that information there for you. I don't have any slides or anything for this lesson. This is all hands-on. But get that in there before midnight, we'll say. 10 screenshots. Okay. Everyone knows what's expected of them. Okay. How was this? Was this too much? Was this a lot? Was this informative? What do you think? Cool. Cool. Are you seeing the possibilities for your film? Are you seeing how this can really impact the look and feeling and the tone of your movie? Like, this is some really cool stuff. Like, from here on out, ladies and gentlemen, you should be color grading everything you do. Okay. You should never not grade your color again. Okay. You should always adjust your color in some way, shape, or form, because the camera does the best it can, but it doesn't know what you want. It doesn't know what the story is. It's just capturing what it sees on the sensor. So from here on out, you should be color grading everything. When we get to your rough cuts for your narrative films, color grading is a final cut thing. You don't need to color grade your stuff in your rough cuts. And as a matter of fact, I might teach you a shortcut for that when we get to that point. So I would advise you not to color grade your work until after your rough cut is complete. And then I'll show you some shortcuts so you can actually get through it faster. Okay. But that's not a rough cut thing. That's a final cut thing. But every final cut that you do from here on out for the rest of your life should be color corrected and color graded based on the needs of your story and your heart's desire. Okay. All right. That is all I have for today. If everyone understands what it is that is expected of them, I'll add that to the slate so it's on there so that I need to look at it. You'll be reminded of the assignment. And I'll make the folder for it in the Google Drive Dropbox right now. That's all I got. I hope that information is cool. I hope that information is helpful. I hope you learned something new. I hope you learned how to use the scopes. That's super key. That's how you can tell someone who's like an amateur versus someone who like kind of knows what they're doing. So you can really make your film look cool by learning and practicing with this stuff. I encourage you to practice more of this. If you've made films in the past, and you all have, because you did your experimental films, right? Like you've all made something. Like take a look at some of your old films and play around with the color and see what you can do with it. And you'll learn some cool stuff. And if you like this stuff, get online, get on YouTube. There are hours-long tutorials and lessons from real-life professional colorists. I found one the other day. It was super cool. It was a real surreal moment. It was a colorist from Dolby. Dolby's here in the Bay Area. And I recognized him because one of my students interviewed him for their documentary about Dolby a number of years ago. And it was super cool because I was sitting there just watching my YouTube and it came up on my YouTube feed. I was like, hey, I recognize this guy. And then I watched his color correcting tutorial and it was super informative. So if you like this stuff, there was a world here that you can go down that rabbit hole. And there's a lot of information to explore. I really only scratched the surface. There's a lot more to this, And if you do color correct, I encourage you to turn off all the lights in your room, close all your windows, because that actually affects the image that you see and it affects your eyes. So colorists always do their work in a very dark room, which is why I argued with the architects for several months about not having windows on the new film room when they finally build it. And I finally won. So I won that battle. All right. That is all. I'm letting you out 5 minutes early. Don't forget to turn that stuff in. I will look for it. And then I'll put in grades. You'll either get a 0 or you'll get 100%. So it's like free points. Okay. You just got to make sure you did them all. Okay. 10 screenshots. I will see you on Monday, right? Yes. I'll see you on Monday. Farewell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Taylor.
You, Mr. Taylor.